Let's do it. Welcome back, everybody. This is Record Store Days 5. I wanted to talk about 9/11, the 11th of September 2001. As a record store employee and patron. As you all know, that was a Tuesday, and back in those days, that's when new releases came out. It was on Tuesdays. So I did have to go to work that day. I was working at both shops, or I was scheduled to work at both shops. So I fell into my morning routine. I had Electric Relaxation by A Tribe Called Quest as my wake-up music, as I did from about the age 17 till about the age 23. After that, I did my morning routine, which included playing a 45 of If You Want Me to Stay by Sly and the Family Stone, which I did every day from about 17 till about 23. I was living with untreated severe mental illness, and that's the way it manifested itself in those days, with really weird OCD things around music. It was very therapeutic for me because it allowed me to get up and go to my job. It reached a point where I was dancing around the house to Gimme Some More by the JBs, and I was oblivious to everything. I was brushing my teeth and packing my lunch for the day, and the phone rang, and I ignored it because I was in my groove, and I didn't care. I heard my mother on the machine as it picked up, and she was saying, "Austin, if you're home, pick up. Pick up. This is emergency, pick up." So I was kind of annoyed, and I picked up the phone, and she informed me of what was going on, and we talked, and she said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, no one from work has called me, so I'm going to work." Honestly, there was no place I would rather be at that point anyway. So I got in my car and I went to work. The store was open, but it was dead. They had the TV on up there, but they were listening to Daydream Nation by Sonic Youth, which was absolutely appropriate. While I was driving to work, the second tower fell. Of course, on West Coast time, it was all different, so... Anyway, I got to work. It was really dead. A few regulars came in, and it was a down day. There was wildfires all around Reno, so even though we were removed from any immediate threats, it had a very dark, dreary feeling around the city that day. So my boss came to me and he said, "It's dead. I'll pay you for the rest of the day if you just want to take off." And I was like, "Okay, cool." I was supposed to work at the shop that sold new stock that day. And we had gotten a mix-up, and I knew that we weren't going to get copies of the Blueprint that day. So if I wanted to hear it that day, I needed to go over to Best Buy to buy it. I'm talking about the Blueprint by Jay-Z, which was the most important thing in the world to me at that point. Even after I had heard the news. I heard the news when my mother called me, and my first thought was, "Oh, I hope I can still get it today." That's how deep into my music therapy I was at that point. So I left the used shop knowing that we wouldn't have copies of the Blueprint, so I was like, perfect, I have time to drive up to Best Buy and buy a copy on CD. So that's exactly what I did. When I got to Best Buy, they didn't have it locked down, but they were fucking intensely secure. And so I went in there, and I was like, "Dude, I just want to buy the new Jay-Z." And he was like, "Okay." I was really twitchy and freaked out. So I didn't have a CD player in my car, so I was very excited to get it home. So I jumped in my car, and there was nobody out, and there was no traffic, and I zoomed home. I had enough time to get a special extra snack for the day, and in those days I bought a CD and I dubbed it to cassette so I could listen to it in my car, especially for new releases like that, so I could familiarize myself. I intentionally chose when I was dubbing down the blueprint for the first time, I was at home and my first instinct was to turn on the television and to look at the news that was happening in New York City. And I started to put on the blueprint and I was recording it at the same time, and I intentionally thought, no, I don't want to associate my first impressions with this music and those images. So I turned it down as I dubbed it and I listened to the news. I wasn't sure if I was still supposed to go to work at my second job. Sorry, I'm in a parking lot here. Lo-fi. So, yeah, let's see if we can... I had enough time at home to record the whole album. I hadn't listened to it yet. I was driving to my second job and I knew, I was like, I'm not going to have time to listen to the whole album and I don't want to interrupt it. So I exercised some serious self-restraint and I didn't put it on. I drove down to my second job, the new shop, which was in a shopping mall. So I go over to the regular side employee entrance. It's locked. And I was like, I hadn't heard from anyone, so I had just assumed it was still on. I go around to the main entrance and it's also locked, and I pull on the door and security is in there, and it's a dude I've never seen before, security, so I'm like, okay, it's not happening. And secretly I'm thinking, yes, now I can just drive around and listen to the blueprint and just jam it and just clear everything out of my brain and just go. And if you know the locale around Reno, there's this little town up in Northern California right across the state border called Susanville. I just drove the fuck up to Susanville, listening to the blueprint on repeat. I chose not to continue looking at those images that day, and I just completely pieced the fuck out. And the main thing was, back then, even though we were in Reno, everybody was scared. Everybody was scared. So I took this very intentional action to just have therapy through music. I was in a place that I was able to do that, thankfully. But, I think back on that day, and a lot of people around my age, everybody who was alive that day in America thinks about it, and that was one of the worst days ever. It was horrible. I have such wonderful memories of that day, driving up through the, Northern California desert, just blaring the blueprint as loud as it would go. Thinking, if this is the end of the world, okay. I just heard one of the greatest hip-hop classics of all time. I'm good. And that was the key to all of it. Think of how classic the blueprint is. That came out on September 11th. Sorry, I'm getting all excited. That came out on September 11th. Unbelievable. And think of all of the influence that album had. That album was, I know he was around before this, but that album was really the thing that put Kanye mainstream. And, present opinions about Kanye aside, you cannot deny his impact on everything ever since. The track with Eminem on there, just an incredible hip-hop classic. It's not even that good of a track, in my opinion, but look at the legacy behind it. The beef with Nas that was just completely blown wide open on that album. What an incredible... It was cinematic to drive, listening to that album. Well, it really did feel like the apocalypse. I remember driving through the Northern California desert, through some of the nearby wildfires. I could see flames in the hills. And I'm just jamming Girls, Girls, Girls. Okay, why the hell not? It really did feel like everything else was just... I don't know what... It obviously wasn't the apocalypse, but it was scary. And that album came through, and I don't want to say it saved my life, but it certainly made that day I remember getting back home 9, 10 o'clock that night, and of course everybody in my house had the news on, and it was still going and going and going, and everyone's like, where you been? And I don't know, driving around listening to music, and everyone thought I was weird. You're not scared? Well, no, I mean, if something's gonna happen like that, I mean, might as well be jamming some hip-hop classics. I don't know. It didn't make sense to me to sit there and dwell on things. I wanted to be out and about and experiencing, you know. So that's one of many forms of therapy through music. And yeah, it didn't change anything about the day. And everything horrible about the day was still horrible. And the implications of everything was still, I mean, we're still dealing with it. But in that moment, at that time, I don't want to say the world was a happy place for me, or that I didn't care, or that I lost my empathy for everyone else, but it did make the next day seem doable. It didn't, that's why I question the use of the word apocalyptic, because it didn't feel like the end of the world. Being able to drive around listening to the Blueprint on that day made it feel like, yeah, tomorrow. Okay, what's up with tomorrow? And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but if I understand things correctly, that's therapy through music. Thanks for listening. A little postscript. I kind of, because I didn't work either of my jobs at either store that day, I kind of got to see myself as the weird patron of the record store in that moment. Like, I'm sure those dudes at Best Buy thought I was just completely out of my mind. Like, hey, can I get the Blueprint? I came in there like a bass head or something. Like, hey, you guys got that new Jay-Z? Like, so I'm sure they had stories about me. So it gave me perspective. And shout out to those dudes at Best Buy for being there at their job. That's a weird sentence. Because without them, I would have had to wait till fucking Wednesday to get the Blueprint. And that's unacceptable, man. Thank you for listening. This is Record Store Daze 5.